Rarely do true marvels occur in just a split second. Many need ages of quiet anguish ere they ultimately display their nature. Upon a rough strip of the African plains, a male who had passed most of his days watching fauna felt he had viewed the wild at its most brutal. Yet on a normal afternoon, he saw a lion pacing sluggishly, lugging an object that surely didn't fit in the bush. What he was soon to reveal was not merely a save. It was a 2-year tale of hurt grit patience and an affection that never left. Daniel Moore had devoted almost 20 years trekking the huge tracts of northern Kenya, a realm where the skyline never appeared to cease and where existence and demise used the same air. As a lead nature scout and eco-photographer, he had recorded lion kills beneath ruby dusks, tusker groups wading streams filled by storms, and cheetahs dropping from fatigue after lightning-quick hunts. His output had been shown in global nature films and protection drives, often linked to world fauna safety plans and green knowledge schemes. At 42, Daniel felt there was scant little remaining that could genuinely shock him. That day started similar to most others. The star hung tall, pitiless, and bright, cooking the dirt until the sky quivered. Daniel had stalled his gritty land cruiser under a single acacia, moving out gently to loose his tight limbs. He reviewed his gear with honed ease photo tubes, sat phone drink stock.
Now, big fella.
Customs fixed in him after eras of toiling in far zones where crisis health airlift could take hours. These steps were instinct, much like the calm needed to last in the bush. As he raised his optics to sweep the wide flat, his gaze snagged something odd in the span. Roughly 200 millimeters off, a lone form drifted over the turf. At first look, Daniel guessed it was a junior male cat roaming betwixt zones not rare in this area. But after a few ticks, a slight oddness sat in his ribs. The cat's stride was jerky, nearly fearful, as if every move needed planned force. Daniel lifted his lens and magnified it. The picture clicked into view and his lungs seized. The beast was awfully gaunt, its bones plain under pulled, grimy coat. Yet it wasn't hunger soul that made Daniel's palms go rigid. There was an item bound about the creature's midriff, black, round foreign jaw against the yellow hues of the plain. For a tick, Daniel felt his sight was tricking him, bent by warmth and span. He winked, fixed the view, and stared anew. It was a wheel. A giant sun-damaged tire was jammed firmly about the feline's midriff. Daniel dipped the glass gently, his brain rushing. In all his time toiling alongside eco-groups and fauna aid squads, he had never viewed a thing like this. Hurt beasts, yes, prey of thief snares and metal loops often, but a lion bearing a vehicle tire as if it were a limb of its frame. The view was oddly chilling, a grim sign of how man's trash could raid even the most far-off biomes. The cat made a few more shaky strides, then halted. Its ribs rose as it fought for air, and for a short, scary second, Daniel felt it might drop right there. The beast rocked, steadied itself, and pushed its frame ahead, again led by urge alone. Viewing via the tube, Daniel sensed a knot in his neck. This was not the pose of a hunter at peace. This was the motion of a being barely hanging on. Every expert urge bid him to act with care. A lion, no matter how frail, was still a lion. Yet something regarding the view drove Daniel ahead. He hung his cam over his back and started to near tread by heedful tread, holding his motion dull and clear. The turf cracked lightly under his shoes, the sole noise in the dense day breeze. As the gap shut, the truth became even more dire. The wheel was aged and split its skin marked by eras of heat and soil. It sat snug about this beast's form, pushing into meat that had surely enlarged around it. Spots of hair were gone where gum had chafed raw on hide. Daniel could view the creature's flanks barely widening with every gasp, as if the wheel itself were choking its air sacs. The beast spotted him then. It rotated its skull slowly, gold orbs fixing upon Daniel's shape. There was no bellow, no alert snarl, no bid to bolt. The cat merely stared at him, drained and quiet, its look heavy with something Daniel had seldom viewed so plain in a feral beast surrender. In that tick, standing solo beneath the harsh African star, Daniel grasped that this meeting was distinct from any he had faced prior. This was not merely a picture, not just another yarn for a green paper or a fauna safety ad drive. Whatever had occurred to this beast had been occurring for a vast while, and whatever ensued next would alter far more than just one soul. Daniel grabbed his sat communicator, his pulse racing with dire haste. He did not yet realize how long the cat had been snagged like this. He did not know if aid would show in time. But one fact was sorely clear as he gazed into those weary orbs. This was merely the start of a remarkable and heartbreaking tale. Daniel calmed his panting as he halted a brief span from the beast, wary not to breach the unseen boundary that split care from peril. Decades of toiling and fauna saving had schooled him that dread could dash faster than noise. He held his stance wide, his palms clear, his acts planned. The plains about them felt oddly hushed, as if the soil itself were pausing its sigh. Nearer the wheel appeared even fouler than it had via the glass. It was not simply coiled about the cat's torso. It had turned into a piece of it. Sun-scorched and split the gum was stuck with dried soil and tiny rocks joined together by age and warmth. Daniel knew the signs instantly. This was not a fresh bit of trash. It was the sort of heavy wheel often dumped near far build sites or wrongly left along the rims of guarded ground, a far too frequent topic aired in green laws and fauna safety grant talks. The cat paused, motionless, its sides shaking. Daniel could view every bone, each one etched clearly under tight hide where the ring pushed inward. The coat was eroded entirely, bearing spots of marred skin. The creature's gasping was weak-strained, as if every intake were a deal betwixt hurt and life. Daniel sensed a known pain sit in his ribcage, the self-same pain he felt whenever man's disregard crashed with the wild in the most savage modes. He took a single wary stride nearer. The cat did not withdraw. Rather, it dipped its skull a bit, as though the toil of keeping it vertical had grown too great. Its orbs stayed locked on Daniel, not with anger, but with a flat, spent sensing. There was no terror in them, no ember of battle left to call. Daniel had viewed that stare prior not solely in beasts, but in folks' souls, who had borne too much for too long, and had hit the rim of what their frames could hold. Daniel bent slowly, holding his mass, even his motions checked. From this view, he could spot how firmly the wheel gripped the cat's midriff. The gum pushed against rib. There was no room to slide a palm through, no clear space to hint a simple fix. Whatever had snared this being had done so ages ago, and days had only rendered the plight more cruel. A mute tide of rage swelled in Daniel, keen and unwanted. He mused on the many talks on wise land use, the funds given to nature, clean up the cover-backed growth plans that vowed care and check. And yet here it stood, sign that laxity still found its path deep into kept bush, leaving costs that no rule paper could erase. The cat shifted its load and let out a weak, scratchy noise. It was not a roar, not even a snarl, just a gasp, pushed via a weary pipe. Daniel halted, then eased when the tone died. He reached gently for his drink flask, opened the lid, and tipped a wee bit onto the arid dust betwixt them. The fluid stained the dirt, at once fading almost as fast as it hit the floor. The cat strove to dip its head, but the ring blocked it from curving right. Its throat pulled oddly, sinews shaking as it missed reaching the liquid. Daniel felt a pinch behind his sight. Without musing, he curled his palm, tipped a bit of fluid into his grip, and reached it ahead. For a tick, nil occurred. Then the beast leaned ahead just enough for its liquor to touch weakly against Daniel's skin. The feel was short, almost shy, but it was true. The cat drank sluggishly, each tiny act costing plain toil. Daniel stayed wholly still, alert that this weak second rested on faith that could break at any tick. As the liquid ran dry, Daniel drew his palm back and stood a bit. His brain was already summing gaps, reaction times, crisis steps. He grabbed for his SAT device, digits firm, despite the haste beating in his chest. Fauna save missions were costly, hard, often hung on scarce green funds and crisis health tools. He realized that ringing for aid did not vow a fast cure, but not ringing would vow doom. He cast his look back to the cat once more. The beast stood where it was still, now its power clearly waning. The wheel, dark and dead, sat against gold hair like a badge of trespass that never ought to have been here. Daniel placed the call. As the link buzzed to life, he grasped that this was no longer just a view, no longer a record for a later note or knowledge drive. This was a duty he could not march away from. Whatever had held this lion for so long had finally been viewed, and from this tick on there would be no looking back. Ages ere Daniel ever placed a boot under that thorn tree before the orbital call and the mute beg in the cat's orbs. The tale had already started softly, nearly unseen. 2 years prior, the flats at the rim of the guarded zone looked calm under the mild light of late eve. The turf waved lightly with the breeze, and the sky bore the far cries of fowl nesting for the night. It was the sort of peace that often veiled peril in plain view. The lion had been fresher then, not yet fully mature, his ruff only starting to shade about the throat. He was fit, fun, and rash in the mode only youth can be. Along with a few other lad lions from the group, he roamed nearer to the edge of man's soil than he ought to have. There, past the known smell of brush and dirt, lay something odd. A left trash site where folks had dumped bits of steel, crushed cans, and a lone huge wheel. At first, the ring was not more than an item of interest. The young cats clawed at it, spun it over the earth, and raced one another through its empty core. It hopped. It moved. It looked safe. The young male cat shoved his skull via it time and again, drawing back out with ease. Each time his trust rose. The wheel did not fit in the bush, but he did not know that. To him, it was merely another test in a realm he was still grasping to walk. Then arrived the tick that altered all. Led by wonder and a rising sense of daring, the young cat walked ahead and shoved his shoulders via the hole the gum pulled, then clicked back with cruel force. In a flash, the wheel locked tight about his chest. He halted, mixed at first, then scared. He turned and yanked, nails biting into the dust as his frame fought. But the harder he fought, the firmer the ring gripped. His wails rang across the flat. High, keen noises full of dread. The mother heard them at once. She came dashing, her frame low sinews, tight orbs, huge with shock. When she viewed her kit snared, she jumped at the wheel without pause. Her jaws bit onto the gum fangs, going deep as she hauled with all her might. The ring pulled but did not yield. Another female joined her, then one more. Jointly, they chomped, pulled, and hauled, their strong forms fighting against something that did not act like meat or bone. Hours went. The star sank below the rim. The youth's wails faded, turning raspy as weariness set in. The mother declined to quit. She toiled until her mouth hurt, and her force began to drop until the night wind chilled and the lights showed above. But the trap stayed where it was mute, rigid. Not far off, a junior scout named Samuel had been walking the outer line of the park. He caught the wails and trailed the noise only to halt short when he viewed the view growing in the gloom. He had no slicing gear, no drug tools, no aid near enough to assist. All he could do was note the spot and call for help that never came in time. In fauna saving, slowed crisis reaction often meant the gap betwixt life and loss. By dawn, the group had started to march on. The wild does not pause for sorrow to fix itself. As days turned into weeks, the lad grew, but the wheel did not. It squeezed with every fleeting month, curbing motion, smashing ribs, changing stance. Stalking became futile. The young cat fell rear, delaying the clan, placing all at risk. Finally, the choice arrived. Mute, savage, and ending. The group could not tote him anymore. The mother stood betwixt her youth and the rest of the clan, her frame stiff with denial, but urge asked life. She moved back step by step, never turning her stare until span forced split. From that tick on, the young cat was solo. He lived on bits on bones left by scavengers and birds. Soil packed itself into the void of the wheel, adding load to an already cruel weight. Rest came in brief sore spans, his frame unable to lay naturally. This was not life. It was grit, and through it all, unseen and unnoted, the costs of man's laxity hung. Green cleanup plans talked in rooms far off had not hit this spot. Risk notes and cover claims would never list this lion. Yet here in the core of the plains, the price of that disregard was gasping, hurting, and declining to end. By the time Daniel would ultimately spot him, 2 whole years had gone. 2 years of agony, exile, and life driven by naught more than urge and something else, something unsaid, pausing just past the skyline. The weeks post the group marched off, faded into something formless and mean. Minus the shield of the clan, the young cat floated through the plains like a shade that no longer fit anywhere. His form kept growing as the wild asked, but the ring stayed the same cruel size. With every passing moon, it dug deeper into sinew and bone, molding him in modes no beast should ever bear. Stalking was no longer a choice. He could not run, could not bend right, could not coil his frame the way a lion must to drop meat. The wheel ruined his poise, scraping against the dirt and stating his nearness long ere he ever got near. Deer fled at the first view of him. Even lesser beasts felt frailty and ran. Need became a steady pal, biting more sharply than hurt. He grasped to last on what others left. When scavengers ended ripping at a kill and moved on, the cat would, near hours later, wary and lag his skull low, his gasp faint. Often there was scant left frames, picked pure bits already turning rank under the star. Still he fed. Life urge ruled over ego. In the bush there were no second shots, no safe nets, no crisis healthcare schemes to lean on. There was merely grit. At eve, sleep brought no ease. The trap pushed his form into weird poses, raising his chest while his skull pushed poorly against the dust. Nap came in short, jagged spans. His back began to arc under the steady stress. Each intake felt tinier than the prior, as if his ribs no longer recalled how to fully spread. Hurt became so known that it dimmed into the rear swap by a blunt, steady press that never truly went. Other cats cut his route from time to time, males going through zones, females hunting with their kits. They felt something off at once. Some snarled and kept their gap. Others shunned him wholly, seeing him as already gone. In the trade of life, frailty had no worth. The cat grasped to stay hid, moving during the hottest times, when others slept, masking amid stones and tall stalks, when risk went too near. Yet even in exile, he was not wholly solo. From a span, he sometimes caught a known smell borne by the breeze. On scarce times at dawn or just ere dusk, he would spot a form on a far hill, a female standing still viewing. She never neared. She never cried out. But she was there, always far enough away to stay unseen by others, near enough to hold watch. The cat did not know how long she paused or where she went when dark fell. He only knew that rarely, when the agony felt too much, that smell came back firm and rooting. Times changed. Storms came and went, turning dust to muck and back again. The core of the wheel filled with soil set by rain and heat until it turned heavy as rock. What had once been a vacuous space now added smashing load to an already ruined frame. His bones pushed out as he grew, but the ring pushed back, making rib bend in. Gasping grew tougher, moving grew slower. Still he stayed. In saving notes, life rates are gauged in shares. In cover-backed fauna risk checks, plights like his are seen as debts long ere the end is known. But the plains do not run on sheets or guessed costs. It runs on will, on urges older than any man grid. And somewhere deep inside that beat frame, the cat bore a cause to keep going, something tougher than need, tougher than hurt. 2 full years went like this. By the time Daniel Moore would ultimately view him under the thorn tree, the lion had already beat odds that no one would ever figure. He was leaner, fainter, remade by woe, but he was alive, and that fact alone meant the tale was far from done. The now came back with silent malice. Daniel stood under the thorn tree, the load of the past sitting hard in his ribs as he read the cat once more. Knowing what the beast had borne did not make the view simpler. It made it crushing. 2 years of woe had not snapped the lion's wish to live, but it had left him perilously near to the rim. Daniel's orbs moved to the dust about them. At first he noted only the designs of split earth and strewn rocks. Then he viewed the signs' prints dug into the dirt crossing and knew. Scavenger paws. Many of them. His gut clenched. Scavengers seldom roamed solo, and when they scented frailty, they were calm. They paused, they tried, and then they seized. He looked back at the cat. The beast stood with his skull dipped, now flanks shifting poorly as he fought to pull air. He had no might left to run, no clan to guard. Daniel knew the savage fact of the plains. If the pack showed ere aid, did the end would be fast and cruel. This was no longer just a save plight. It was a dash against time. Daniel raised his SAT device and rang the crisis fauna save code kept in his list. The link hummed before a tone finally replied. He gave the spots his terms checked but dire. A lion male badly thin, snared in a wheel for a long span. When the reply came back, it felt like a punch to the bust. The closest squad was over 90 mins off. Ground was hard. Appearance could be slowed. 90 mins. Daniel cut the call and let the device drop back into his sack. He scanned his stores simply. Fluid 1 crisis light and a small flying cam used mainly for sky photos and home checks. The cam's power light shined half full. Not prime, not ample for many flights, but it was something. The breeze turned, bringing with it a deep, far noise. Daniel spun slowly toward the line. Their way across the turf forms moved low to the dust, spreading out, growing wider with each tick. Scavengers. Their shapes cleared as they drew nearer, lobes ahead, frames loose with hope. They had caught the smell. Daniel felt his beat race. Every urge pushed him to pull back, to make gap while he still could. In fauna risk care schooling, person safety always came first. No cover plan, no saving goal was worth a man's life. He knew the laws. He had schooled them to newer scouts. But he did not shift. The cat moved, lifting his skull just enough to track Daniel's stare. He viewed them too. A weak tightness passed through his spent frame, a recall of risk waking old urges. He could not dash. He could not battle. He could only stand there, bare, waiting. Daniel gulped hard and took a stride nearer to the cat instead of away. He tipped the last of his drink onto the dust, then into his grip again, giving what scant ease he could. The beast drank poorly, barely raising his liquor. Daniel could feel the shake in his own palm. The pack moved another few yards, halting to smell the wind. Their giggling calls floated weakly across the flat, sending a shiver through Daniel despite the warmth. He grabbed for the cam box digits firm, now his choice set. If he was going to quit, it would be after help showed or not at all. This was no longer about watching or noting. It was about will. As the cam rose into the sky with a keen machine buzz, the pack paused unsure. Daniel steered it ahead, putting himself right betwixt the cat and the coming risk. He did not know if the cam would be ample. He did not know how long he could keep them off. But standing there with doom moving ever nearer, Daniel grasped something with sheer truth. This was the tick everything hung on. The cam hung unsteadily in the hot wind, its deep engine hum slicing through the peace of the bush. Daniel drove it ahead, placing it betwixt the lion and the nearing pack. The beasts stopped, skulls tipped, lobes moving. They had never viewed a thing like this prior. An item that moved minus smell, minus meat, minus dread. For a short tick, doubt took the place of need. Daniel's pump beat as he viewed them stall. He knew this break was weak. Scavengers were smart able. They grasped fast. If they saw the cam held no true harm, they would move again. He fixed the knob, sending the cam into a sudden keen act. It dived low, then rose sharp, its blades crying louder. Dust rose from the earth, spinning into the dimming light. The pack stepped back, shocked, but they did not run. Daniel scanned the power level again. It had already fallen lower than he wished. He could not keep this up for long. The cam was a short shield, at best a thin wire betwixt life and ruin. Still, he flew it with care, making the tool seem erratic, fierce, something not worth trying just yet. Rear of him the cat moved. Daniel felt rather than viewed the act a fine shift in the air. He looked back and was hit by how tiny the beast appeared now, how reduced by years of hurt and need. And yet the cat stayed standing, not laying down, not yielding. That mute defiance tightened something deep in Daniel's chest. The star sank nearer to the rim, painting the heavens with deep gold and ruby. Shades grew across the soil, and with them came a thermal drop that Daniel felt at once. Gloom would bring more than chill. It would bring doubt, more hunters and fewer choices. Save squads shunned night tasks whenever doable. Fauna crisis reaction rules were clear on that point. Dark made everything hard, from mapping to health work. Daniel mused again of quitting. It would have been the sane pick. Step back slow, go to the truck note. The spots let the save crew manage what they could when they showed. His own safety was not something to bet lightly. He had kin back home, duties tied to saving plans, long-term fauna cover deals that hung on his skill and lead. No one would blame him for putting his life first. But as the thought grew, it faded just as fast. Daniel lowered the cam to a firm hover and walked back to the cat's flank. He bent again, snubbing the pain in his joints, and put one palm on the arid dust. The lion turned its skull, a bit gold orbs meeting his. There was no terror there, no hope, just knowing, a split tick of waiting. "I'm not quitting." Daniel hushed his tone, barely heard even to himself. He tipped the last beads of fluid into his grip and held it again. The cat drank slowly, then ceased. Too spent to go on, Daniel shut the flask and put it aside. He would need to save whatever force stayed. Not just the lion's, but his own. The cam's power alert blinked. Daniel steered it back into a slow loop, saving juice, using noise and act only when the pack crept too near. They rounded now at a span, gold orbs mirroring the fading light. They were calm. They always were. Minutes went, then more. Daniel's sinews hurt from bending, but he did not shift away. He stayed beside the cat, a mute shape against the hugeness of the earth. In his job, he had talked often about the moral duty of saving, about trust, green harm fixing, and the true price of laxity. Now those ideas were no longer mental. They were gasping beside him. A weak shake came from his sack. The SAT device buzzed softly with an income note. The aid squad was on its way. Still far, but moving. Ease washed through Daniel, checked by the knowing that the most risky ticks were still ahead. He gazed back toward the pack, then down at the cat once more. This was no longer about waiting. It was about holding the line, and Daniel was set to do exactly that for as long as it took. The noise hit Daniel ere he viewed it. A low droning drifted across the plains, strange and clearly human. Beams showed in the span, carving thin paths through the growing gloom. Ease washed over him, but it was wary ease. Skill had schooled him that aid did not mean safety. Not yet. The truck rolled to a halt a brief gap away. Gates opened fast. A woman walked out first, her acts peaceful but dire. Dr. Emily Carter, a lead nature vet, with decades of field skill, read the view in ticks. She noted the cat's state, the rounding pack in the span, the wheel locked about the beast's form. And then she met Daniel's orbs. "You did the just act staying," she spoke softly. There was no time for long tales. The squad moved with drilled speed, unpacking health boxes, vein fluids, checking tools fed by movable cells. This was not a controlled space. There were no surgery rooms, no clean slabs, no backup power. Out here, every pick bore chance, and errors could cost lives, man or beast. "Duck down." Carter bent beside the lion and put her listener against his ribs. She harked for several seconds, her look fixing. The pulse speed was riskily faint. His frame heat had fallen. High fluid loss, deep hunger, and rot were already toiling against him. She pulled a wee red sample using a small field testing set, paid through crisis fauna health grants. The outcome proved what she dreaded. The cat was on the edge. "Total sleep isn't a choice," she told the crew. "His pump won't survive it." The terms sat heavy in the breeze. Minus full sleep, every act would be risky. The wheel could not simply be yanked off. It had been there too long. Soil rocks, set trash had filled its core, turning it into dead mass. When they strove to move it even a bit, it hardly budged. They toiled heedfully, clearing by hand, using tiny gears to clear what they could from inside the ring. Set muck broke apart slowly. Bits of bone, old weed, bug parts fell away. Minutes went. Then more damp ran down their visages as dark moved nearer. After nearly half an hour, the wheel was lighter, but still fixed in spot. Dr. Carter sighed slowly. "There's only one path left." A SAVE crew member fetched a cell-fed slicer. Its edge dull with use, but keen enough for the task. Inside, the gum steel cords were hid. Toughness that made the job far more risky. Fluid gears were too strong. One bad act could break ribs already weak by years of crush. The cat moved, feeling the shift. A low, fearful noise rolled in his chest. "We'll need someone to keep him firm," Dr. Carter stated. Daniel stepped ahead without pause. He placed himself with care, binding his limbs about the lion's skull and ribs, keeping him tight, not with force but with closeness. He talked softly, his tone flat, despite the shake in his palms. The cat's nails raked against Daniel's limb, once etching shallow paths across his skin. He did not flinch away. "Start," Dr. Carter commanded. The saw wailed to life, its cry cutting through the night breeze. Fire flew as the edge bit into gum, then iron. The cat jerked poorly, sinews shaking in dread and hurt. Daniel gripped tighter, just enough to stop him from turning. He did not let go. Seconds pulled into minutes. The first slice was done, then the next. Each act was planned exact, backed by years of health schooling and risk-check rules common in high-liability fauna aid tasks. When the last part gave way, the ring fell to the dust with a blunt thud. For a tick, no one moved. The lion's form was bared. Coat gone in spots, skin marred, and hurt ribs marked with deep lines where gum had pushed for 2 long years. Dr. Carter moved at once, washing the cuts, putting germ killers, starting vein fluids. The squad toiled fast, now dashing against shock and loss. Then gently, the lion's chest widened, a deep gasp, then another. 10 minutes went. The cat shifted, trying his mass. He strove to rise and missed. Tried again, limbs vibrating wildly. On the third shot, he stood tipsy but vertical, staying free for the first time in 2 years. Daniel stepped back, his limbs hurting, his breath short. He stared in hush, realizing he had just viewed something scarce. Something no cover plan, no saving fund, no written rule could fully list. The save was not done. But the unreal had just occurred. The save crew had barely started to stow their gear when the noise returned. Low, known, risky. Daniel froze as he spun toward the gloom past the ring of beams. From the shades at the rim of the plane, forms began to shift again. Scavengers lured back by the smell of red frailty and chance. They had not gone far. They had only paused. Dr. Carter swore gently under her gasp. Sleep guns were brought up, but there were too many beasts and not enough time. Even a perfectly aimed hit would halt only 1 or 2. The rest would still show. The cat stood nearby, limbs shaking, his gasping short once more as drain washed over him. He was loose, but he was far from fit. The pack moved in a wide half-ring, their yellow orbs showing the fake light. 15 murs, then nearer. Their trust rose with every stride. Daniel felt his beat soar, every sinew tightening, as urge yelled at him to shift. Yet he stayed where he was. Then the lion stepped ahead. It was not a mighty act. There was no grand rush. The cat merely put his spent frame betwixt Daniel and the coming peril. His pose was tipsy, his bellow little more than a forced, smashed noise. But it was a clear deed of stand. After 2 years of woe, after being left chased and nearly wiped, he picked to guard. The pack paused, and then a roar sliced through the dark. It was deep, whole, truly mighty. From rear a stony hill not far off, a female showed. Her form was thin, but strong. Her acts smooth and ruled. She did not hurry, she did not halt. She walked with a sureness that iced the pack in spot. In a sudden flash of haste, she dashed, hitting one of them with a lone, cruel strike. The beast yelled and fell back. The others split at once, running into the gloom, their trust broken. Hush followed. The female halted a brief span away and turned her stare to the young male cat. For a long tick, neither shifted. The plane seemed to hold its sigh once again. Gently, heedfully, she neared. She dipped her skull and began to smell him. His visage, his throat, the marred hide where the wheel had once been. Then she washed him softly, clearly, as if learning every bit of him anew. Daniel felt his pipe choke. Something moved in his mind. He walked back to his truck and grabbed his cam, scanning fast through old pics kept on the data chip. Snaps taken months prior than a year ago. Rear shots of sites far fauna. And there it was, time and again. The same female always at the rim of the view, watching, pausing. The truth struck him with mute force. She had never quit. For 2 long years, while her son bore alone, she had stayed nearby, not near enough to show herself, not far enough to leave him. She had lasted on her own, rounding the zone, guarding from the shades. She had waited for this tick for the tick, when he could finally be free. Dr. Carter stood beside Daniel and put a palm on his back. "You didn't just save a cat," she spoke lightly. "You joined a kin." The female raised her skull and gazed at the wide flats. The young cat took a shy stride, then another. When he dipped, she paused and stayed. Jointly, they began to march away from the glows, away from the wheel lying left on the dust, away from the spot of woe. Daniel watched until their shapes faded over a low hill, two shades moving slowly but surely into the hugeness of the plains. He dipped his cam without taking another shot. Some ticks he knew were not meant to be grabbed or covered or studied via risk checks and saving funds. They were meant to be recalled. In the end, it was not tech money or crisis reaction rules that bore the lion through 2 years of pain. Those things showed only at the last hour. What kept him live was something older, tougher, and solid. A mother's bond. And that bond, at last, had been paid. If this tale moved your soul even just a bit, let us know. You don't need to pen much. Simply note 1 if you trust a mother's bond never dims. Or note 0 if this tale made you pause and muse about the price of man's hit on nature. Your tiny note aids this feed share more tales like this one. Tales about beasts, kindness, and the mute marvels that still occur in our realm. And if you'd like to track these trips, please follow the feed. Every new tale you view aids us voice the next one. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next tale.